Well, good evening, my brothers and my sisters. Welcome again to Bible study on this Tuesday evening. We're so delighted that you're able to join us as we continue to move through this season called the season of Advent. This past Sunday was the third Sunday. Well, this is the third week of Advent, shall I say? Last Sunday being the third Sunday of Advent. And of course, it is a time when we um, uh, look with expectancy to the birth of our Lord and Savior Jesus the Christ. And it's a wonderful time, I think, among all of the other activities that we have, which I think are admirable activities. It's a great season, but as we move through the season, we want to also uh, um, be in tune spiritually to what's going on. I've chosen, as you know, to reflect upon Christmas carols, and you can do the same thing. You can pull up. Of course, I have a hymnal or several hymnals of just I've collected over the years, but of course you can find them in a hymnal if you have it, or you can Google them and just to reflect upon a stanza or two of one of the Christmas carols, which also tell the story in song of the Savior's birth. I think you'll find it very enriching and rewarding in terms of devotional moments. We need devotional moments as a balance to our hectic and sometimes traumatic and troubling times in which we live. Want to apologize for last Tuesday. There was a power failure in the area where I live, and all day I kept hoping that we could get things back online for Bible study last Tuesday rather. But our power went out, the internet went out, our phones went out, um, television went out. Uh, but I thought about that in terms of how blessed we have been for these, I guess, 3 years now in the midst of the pandemic. I think this is the first time that has happened. And so, anything dealing with technology, it's wonderful when it works. And when it doesn't work, it just doesn't work. But we're back today, and we thank God. Now we're going to continue then another week, which will be next Tuesday, and we will take a break following next Tuesday for a couple of weeks till the beginning of the new year. But we're grateful again that you have joined us. Just be reminded of again. I want to keep before us, particularly members of Monumental, our Walk by Faith effort. We don't want to, by not talking about it, make it seem like it is no longer important. We're still asking and seeking your special offerings and donations so that we can finish the work that we need to do. And you know what that is by now in terms of our parking lot. It looks like we're not going to be able to do that work by the end of the year before the uh, uh, winter really arrives. And so we're going to wait until spring. But by spring, we want to be ready and have ideas of having a worship service in the spring once the parking lot is finished. I don't think well I know during my pastorate we've never worshipped outdoors. We won't take the church outside and in our parking lot next spring, but that's what we hope for. Always hope for something. And of course, we hope for what God has in store for us in the year 2023, which is rapidly approaching. In line with the season, however, we're our music ministry under the direction of Minister Gary Taylor is presenting a mini Christmas concert on December the 18th. That's Sunday, December the 18th. And rather than traditionally coming back to church for another service for it, we're having it in conjunction with our Sunday morning service. And so when we complete the morning service through the sermon, then we will transition into the Christmas concert prior to the benediction. So we hope that you'll just keep that in mind and look forward to the joy of the season through the sacred songs that I think are so meaningful at this time of the year. So that's the 18th, and our choir has already begun uh, additional rehearsals to to uh, to make this presentation what we want it to be for you and to glorify God as well. That's the 18th. Immediately following the sermon, we will transition into the Christmas, the mini Christmas carol concert. I want us to just be prayerful for one another. This is a season, as you know, of great pain for so many people. We've had several funerals since Thanksgiving, actually, and it's a difficult time for grief and for remembrance. And as I say often, um, these type of seasons remind us of who used to be at the table with us and used to be in our homes with us, or we would go to their homes. And so we want to pay special attention to one another and to those in our congregation, in our communities, um, who may just need a kind word of encouragement from us. COVID, this pandemic, um, even as it seems that the worst is behind us, this pandemic has left a permanent mark on humanity, a permanent scar on our communities and our families, our institutions, including our churches. And so I think now this would be the third Christmas season that we have been either in the pandemic or trying to come out of the pandemic, and so it's caused a lot of additional uh, anxiety for people and loneliness and stress, and we need as the Black community and as the Black church community, we need to be very mindful. And I repeat a lot because I think it's so important that we think sometimes that our faith alone is enough to be the buffer and to strengthen us. And of course, it is. Our faith will do that for us, but it does not mean that our faith should not be stretched to include other ways that God can bring healing to us. And sometimes that may be through uh, prof, professional counseling, reaching out and just letting people know that you're hurting, letting people know because we don't normally want to do that. Sometimes we feel guilty and think that if we have to do that, it's because we don't have enough. We're not praying enough, or we don't have enough faith. And it's not about that. It's about the fragility of the human body and the human mind, and the need to admit that, admit our need for help, and to reach out to someone who either can help us or who can direct us to receiving the help that we need. And so let's just be very prayerful. And when I say prayerful, more than prayerful, because prayer alone uh, doesn't fix things. Prayer fixes our hearts, but 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 you know we have to do more than pray. And so let's do that, so that this truly will be a time that we can celebrate the wonderful gift that God has given to the world, and the gift is to the world. We often miss that in John 3:16. For God so loved, not just he just so loved good people or church people or rich people or uh, people based on race and nationality and ethnicity. God so loved the world, and world includes everybody in the world. See, he gave Jesus, his son, to the world. Now, the world may reject him and has, but his love um, was so strong that it risked being rejected. Um, that's how much God loves us. So let's just be prayerful and thankful and joyous during this season when there's so much to complain about and so much to feel badly about, that we can rejoice that joy to the world. The Lord is come, and we thank God for that. And I just want to say in passing, um, reflecting on the election in Georgia, and I've been very much concerned about that, and I'm sure that you have as well. Um, and so there is some hope, and the hope is that in the new year, um, things can get done in Washington, that we can find ways to move past our deep divisions and fears of one another, and suspicions of one another, and be the nation that we are called upon to be. Now we are in the final stages of our study about the Sermon on the Mount, a wonderful journey that we have taken. And in chapter 7, now we want to um, return to um, this final chapter and the final words concerning the Sermon on the Mount. Chapter 7, Jesus deals with several things. He deals with judging others, and we have talked about um, judging others. Jesus tells us not to judge one another and tells us why. Then Jesus uh, has a section on prayer, and we talked about how vital prayer is to Jesus, and therefore how vital it is to those of us who are seeking to follow Jesus. And Jesus is very clear that the things I'm asking you to do, he says, are not easy to do, um, and may not even seem um, humanly instinctive to do. Um, it is not maybe uh, instinctive to love or to not to judge people. How easy it is to seek revenge, and easy it is to hate people who you feel may be threatening to you. Um, Often our fears take over. Jesus is saying, I understand all of that. And he's saying, well, that's why I'm telling you to pray. And that's why I'm giving you a clear understanding of what prayer is and the importance of prayer. So he talks about asking, it shall be given, seeking, you shall find, knocking, the door shall be open. And we talked about how, uh, you know, prayer is not taking a wish list to God and saying, okay, here's my list now. Give me what I wrote down on my list. Prayer rather is um, being in tune with God's will for our lives and allowing God the freedom and the authority to help us to think through things in a different way. Maybe what we're praying for needs to change. Maybe our hearts need to change. Maybe as we're praying uh, that God will fix others, that prayer also ought to mean that God needs to fix me, so that even if people don't change, and there's nothing we can do to change people. Some circumstances we cannot change, but then, Lord, what do I need in order um, to 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 change, so that I can look at things differently. I will have a different perspective. So he goes through all this, and then that ends the section on prayer. But then we move to it's just about a couple of verses, but it is a section about and the caption is the narrow and wide gates. So the rest of the chapter deals with three, um, shall I say, three sets of twos. So we're going to deal with two ways or two gates, either one, two ways or two gates. Then we're going to deal with um, two harvests, two harvests, just because Jesus is going to talk about trees, and he's going to talk about the fruit uh, that that comes from that tree, and good fruit and bad fruit. And then he's going to talk about uh, two builders, wise and foolish builders. And so we got three sets of twos. So first is about two ways or two gates. Let me read this, as perhaps you may read along with me, from the 7th chapter, and I'm reading today from the New International Version. I appreciate someone spoke to me on Sunday. Won't call names, but just was speaking to me about different versions that I use that I think will be helpful. And again, my default version, considering my age and generation, is the King James version. That's my default. And if you listen to me quote scripture a lot, I just naturally quote from the King James Bible, which I love dearly. Other translations, and if the question is, well, which one is the Bible? Well, all of them are Bibles, and all of them are legitimate, authoritative translations of the Bible. Um, One is the New Revised Standard Version. Um, Another is the one I use probably next to King James, which is the New International Version called NIV. I think probably the NIV is the most popular translation of all of the translations, and there are others. There's the New Living Bible, which I use from time to time, and there is what I mentioned to one of our members, the Voice, which just is, I think, very. There's the Message, which I know a lot of people prefer. I think it's what I find helpful is putting them side by side and just comparing, and each one giving a different nuance, a a different word that just illuminates the passage in a wonderful way. But I'm reading from the NIV. Enter chapter 13. Enter through. This is Jesus speaking. Enter through the narrow gate. Enter through the narrow gate. For wide is the gate, and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate, and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Again, just powerful. Two gates, two ways. The narrow gate and the broad gate. The broad gate, Jesus says, leads to destruction, and it's it's not surprising then that the gate that leads to destruction is a gate that many people enter, and he's making it very clear. He's saying that's the gate that many people enter. He's saying broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But then the other gate, he's making a comparison. Two gates. The small is the gate, meaning the gate is small, and narrow the road. It's a narrow road. It's not a wide thoroughfare. It's not like Market Street. It's more like the block that that you live on, that a snowplow get can't get through. Narrow is the gate, and is the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. That's very interesting, because what Jesus is saying is that most people are headed to destruction, but only a few are headed to life. Now it's interesting, the comparison that he's making, because what Jesus and really it's kind of a summary of what he's been saying um, all along on the Sermon on the Mount. People are listening to him, and they're called upon to make a decision. See, now there are a few disciples, we said before, few disciples may be with him on the mountain, because he had already called a few, just not all of them, but some. But most of those people on that mountain are people. They're familiar with his miracles. Maybe some of them had been healed by him. Maybe they had relatives and friends that were healed. But this is the first significant teaching that they're hearing from him. He's laying out the blueprint. This is the plan of salvation. This is what you must do if you follow me. And the difference between Jesus and other rabbis, if you will, of his time is, other rabbis may have been saying this is the road you must travel, but they never could say that I am the road. See, Jesus, for the first time, Jesus is saying to people, not only will I show you the way, but I am the way. See, if you take the broad way, then it means that you have rejected me. And if you take the narrow way with the small gate, it means that you have accepted me. And when you look at the Bible, isn't the Bible about making choices? And that it boils down. And we don't want to oversimplify. People say, that some people see everything in black and white, and there are shades of gray, and that is very true about so much of life. Life is very complex, but when it comes to Jesus, and when it comes to what he's offering, there's only two ways. See, either you for him or you against him, either you follow him or you reject him. That's the choice. He leaves no room for middle ground, or the middle of the road person. The choice is between what? Salvation and what? Damnation. And that's a word that is in the Bible. In fact, let's look at Mark, the 16th chapter. And Jesus is ending his earthly ministry according to the Gospel of Mark and the 16th chapter and the 15th verse. And he gives a version of what we call the Great Commission, which is the more popular one is in the Gospel of St. Matthew. But here he does the same thing. He says in verse 15, he said to them, "Go into all the world." This is after the resurrection, and he's ready to ascend back to the Father. Go into all the world and preach the good news to all creation. That's our assignment. Go into all the world and preach good news to all. The gospel is not bad news. There is bad news, but there's good news about the bad news. And Jesus is saying that what we preach, what we teach is good news. And whoever believes and is baptized will be what? Will be saved. Simple. I mean, it's a choice. No middle ground. If you believe and you're baptized, you're saved. But whosoever or whoever rather does not believe will be condemned. Now, the word condemned is a translation of the word shall be damned, which is what you would find in the King James Version. Same thing. And those signs will accompany those, et cetera, et cetera. So you have two choices. He's leaving the earth, and he's saying, this is your assignment. This is what you need to do. And you need to put before people a choice. Do you want to be saved, or do you want to be damned? Do you want to be condemned? Two choices. But then the Bible is about choices, isn't it? And so let's go back to the book of Joshua in the Old Testament, because at the end of the book of Joshua has led the people all of these years, and just like Moses, he's concerned about their future and about their welfare. He has invested in the people that God has given him to lead, just like a pastor. In fact, Moses and Joshua were Israel's pastor. Joshua succeeded Moses as Israel's pastor, and he's concerned about them as he prepares to leave them. He's concerned about which direction they will take. And so he says in Joshua 24, it's going to be very familiar when we read it, 24:14. He says, "Now fear the Lord." This is Joshua 24:14. Again, here's the choice. "Now fear the Lord and serve him with all faithfulness. Throw away the gods your forefathers worshipped beyond the river and in Egypt." And remember now, their forefathers served idol gods at once upon a time. So he's saying, throw away the gods your forefathers worship. So obviously, if the forefathers worship them, and Joshua's telling them to throw them away, they must still have the gods. See, they kept them, right? Throw away the gods your forefathers worship beyond the river and in Egypt, and what? Serve the Lord. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, and here it is, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve. It is not forced upon us. Joshua is not, threatening them in the sense of, this is what you got to do. People have a right to make choices. God made us that way. Says, choose for yourselves and don't delay the choice. You need to choose now. People have this notion that they can come to Jesus when they want to, when they get ready. And I mean, if you know, you want to take that chance when you get ready. And what does it mean to be ready? Um, Jesus is urging, and Joshua is urging, you got to make this choice. You got to make this choice now. When we hear the gospel of Jesus Christ, it is not something we to delay till next Sunday, or I got to think about it, or I'll do it when I'm ready. You know, it's not the right time. And again, the assumption then is that time is in your hands, which it is not. So if time does not belong to us and belongs to God, it seems like we want to be on God's timetable and understand the sense of urgency. And that's what Joshua is saying. That's what Jesus is saying in the Gospels. But anyway, if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, which is your choice, then choose for yourselves this day who you will serve, whether the gods your forefathers served beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. And here is the key, and here is what we know. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. So Joshua is telling them, now you make your own choices. Now Joshua wants them to choose the Lord, but he's not forcing them to do so, but putting before them two choices. You can choose the Lord. If you choose the Lord, you will have life. If you don't choose the Lord and choose the gods of your forefathers, then you will choose death. So similar to what Jesus is saying to us, go all the way back to the Garden of Eden. Wasn't all of this in the garden about a choice, right? Just to, you know, um, you know, I'm I'm putting you in the garden. There's a tree I don't want you to eat from, the fruit of which I don't want you to eat from. You have choices of all these other trees in the garden. Um, if you make the wrong choice, you will die. You bring sin will enter the world. Things will never be the same again. Or you can choose to obey me, meaning obey God. And of course, Adam and Eve, both of them made a choice, and they had to live with that choice, and we have had to live with their choice. See, because we were, as a result, born in sin and shaped in iniquity. Right. So, two ways Jesus is putting before them. Two ways. And I imagine he's also talking to people who have fallen by the wayside. Um, people who start but don't finish. You and we see that all the time. We see it in our churches. Um, just think about all of the people who have fallen away for whatever reason. I mean, that there are many reasons why that happens, but no longer faithful. Has this pandemic exacerbated that? Perhaps, uh, but we didn't need a pandemic to see that. That's just the way it's always been. There are people who just start out for whatever reason. They get tired, or they can't have their way, or they become discouraged, whatever the reason is, and they fall away. They're not faithful as they used to be. Um, they're not serving in the church uh, the way they used to serve. And of course, pandemic, even though didn't need a pandemic for that to happen, the pandemic obviously has had some effect on the falling away. People have fallen away from the church and from worship, from the sanctuary, from the fellowship, and the importance of the fellowship. And I think Jesus understands that in terms of saying, um, he says so as he nears Calvary. Many will fall away because of my teachings. And we know that happened because when he started talking about bearing a cross, as long as he was feeding people, he was getting a crowd. But when he started talking about bearing a cross, um, putting your hand on the plow, uh, uh, denying self, they said, "Uh-oh, this ain't what we want." We want the free bread. We want the miracles. We want to hear, but we don't want to respond. And so they started walking away. So Jesus has in mind, in terms of following him, that there are those who will not follow from the beginning, but then there are those who will follow for a season, and then they will begin to walk away. And I need to say, and every pastor will tell you, that there are people in the church who've taken advantage of the church. They have received resources from the church, but then they have fallen away. And some of them have gone to other churches. Some of them have gone nowhere. So two ways. The narrow way and the broad way. He's saying that this narrow way involves persecution. You have to be prepared for persecution. You have to be prepared for persecution. You have to be prepared for trials and tribulations. That's why that broad gate and that wide road is full of travelers, and why that narrow small gate, it's called, and that narrow way, Jesus says what? He says only a few find it. Only a few find it. Now let me that's the first set of twos. Let me briefly try to move into the second set of twos, which is two harvests. And I don't know how far I can get, but let's take a stab at it. And I'm going to read this. Watch out, and this is verse 15. So after the first set, the narrow and wide gates, then here is another set. Watch out for false prophets. And we had to spend some time on that. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. By their fruit, and here he goes into the matter of the tree. By their fruit you will recognize them or know them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit. Very important. But a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus, by their fruit, you will recognize them. So I want to stop there, because I think it's very, very, again, he continues his thought process on choices and on twos, two ways. Now he's talking about to harvest. See, he begins talking about false prophets. And I think it's very important because false prophets were not just around in his day and in the life of the early church, but false prophets are prevalent today. So he says false prophets. And what is the definition of a false prophet? Definition is those who mislead the church. Those who mislead the church. So you can have wonderful oratorical skills. You can call yourself a Bible scholar, that you know the Bible, that you've been trained and all of that. But at the same time, be a false prophet. And I think the challenge for us as Christians, serious Christians, is how do we distinguish between false prophets and true prophets? And again, I think what Jesus is saying, you will distinguish them by the fruit. See, and that there are two kinds of fruit. There's good fruit and there's bad fruit. Good trees bear good fruit. Bad trees bear bad fruit. And that's how he says it. Now I think that is not oversimplifying it, because what do we say about people who seem to do good works but could be false prophets? And Jesus is saying, if they are false prophets, it will be shown in the works, because the works of false prophets do not last. See, and I think another way that we can discern between false and true prophets, because the you know we have to bear some responsibility for what we allow ourselves to listen to, and what voices we allow ourselves to hear. So the more we know ourselves, see, and this is very much key to me. The more we know ourselves, the more we're able to discern what is false and what is true. And you can look at a website and say, no, this is not true. This is not what I know to be true from all that I have known and all I have been taught and all I have studied. And so the more we protect ourselves by the more we know. And the reason why people are easily led is because the cup is empty in the first place. See, what we have to do is begin filling the cup in terms of our knowledge, our spirituality, our spiritual growth, being in service, in the fellowship of other Christians, where we can test what we believe. And we're hearing a sermon, a message every Sunday. All of that guards us against false prophets. And the reason why the Nation of Islam, the reason why Jehovah's Witnesses can snatch our people is because the cup is already empty. See? And when it's empty, anybody can come in and just fill that cup with a doctrine, and a cult-like ideology that removes the person's ability to think for him or herself. That's the key. That whenever you let somebody else do your thinking for you, tell you what to believe without leading you into belief, tell you who to marry, tell you that this is it, this is the only way. They don't want you going to seminaries or where you can receive an education beyond their voice. or beyond their voices, if they only want to be the person who fills you, then you want to be skeptical about that, unless it is your own pastor who you trust. And if you don't trust a pastor to teach, then you don't need that pastor, and that pastor doesn't need you. See, and so we can discern false prophecy uh, by the more we know, the more we are exposed to the Word of God, and the more we listen to the voice of God, because God speaks to us. God speaks to us as well. And when we're in a congregation where there is a freedom to think for yourself, um, a freedom to know Christ for yourself, and not a dictatorial, authoritarian uh, structure that tries to fit you into a certain pattern, um, then we know that that's false prophecy. And people have been permanently injured spiritually and emotionally by being in settings that are stifling and suffocating their spirits and their minds. Uh, I've said, again, I always talk about what I've said because I don't want you to think I don't remember what I said, but I've said over the years, um, when you come to church, you don't leave your mind at home. See, when you come to church, you want to bring your mind, and I want to stimulate the mind. I want us to be able not just to shout, but to think. I want us to be able to listen to the gospel and hear and grow that way. See, and so anyway, we're gonna shut it down. And again, God bless you. Join us on Sunday mornings at 10 o'clock during the Advent season as we're drawing closer to the end of the year, through the Advent series of sermons on the messages uh, within the our Christmas carols, our sacred songs, and hopefully join us again in Bible study as we near the end of the year. God bless you and God keep you until we meet again.